good start. Anyway, Statue of Liberty is really the story of the relationship between the U.S. and France. I'm sure you heard that Statue of Liberty is a gift from France. We got to qualify it a little bit. It's the story of the gift of the people of France to the people of the United States. And what that means is government didn't get involved. And when there's no government involvement, no backing, there's no money. No money means everything goes slow, real slow. So that's part of the story. But we got to go back in time and ask the question, why? Why would France want to give us a statue of this magnitude in the first place? They really liked us. They admired us. And over there was an intellectual. His name was Edouard de la Boulaye. Did you ever hear of him? You French? The reason I ask is nobody ever heard of him, even French people never heard of him. So don't feel bad if you never heard of Edouard de la Boulaye. But he's an important man in the story of the statue. He's probably the most important person because he had the idea. So he was really passionate about American ideals. He was very interested in our American Constitution. He had written books about the American Revolution. And we're in the 1860s. We've just ended our Civil War. He was an abolitionist. In fact, he started an abolitionist society in France. So he wanted to honor all those ideals that he admired. But it was kind of a vague notion. What form it should take, he wasn't sure about it. But at a dinner party, he met a young French artist, Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. And Bartholdi, 10 years earlier, was hired by the French government to go to Egypt and photograph things like the Sphinxes and the pyramids, the antiquities. And at this time, Egypt's about to open the Suez Canal. And he designs a statue on the same scale as the Statue of Liberty. Only she's dressed like an Egyptian woman, and quite different, but same scale, same size. And they're models of this statue in the museum. You know, they're maquettes, and they're about this big. And it's in the Bartholdi case, so that's something you should see when you go into the museum. They're pretty cool to see. And he offers it to Egypt, says it would be really iconic if you put this statue at the entrance of the Suez Canal. And Egypt says, well, yeah, it's a great idea, but we don't have any money. Sorry. So the idea gets put on hold, but when he meets La Boulaye at the dinner party, he thinks, I can take that work I've already done and turn it into the ideals that La Boulaye is so passionate about. And the project is launched. 1871, Bartholdi comes to the United States to look around and find a spot for his statue. He goes everywhere. But when he sees this empty island, which incidentally was once a fort, this was Fort Wood, and the Statue of Liberty stood right where the fort was. You know, it was a military installation. So he did, and it's deserted at that point. And he decides this is the perfect place. He returns to France, and he finds a workshop. He settles into a workshop on the outskirts of Paris. He hires about 185 people to begin work. And the Statue of Liberty is a sculpture. Everything about her is made by hand. She's completely made of copper. And it has taken 35 years for the copper to turn this wonderful shade of green. It wasn't part of the plan, this oxidation. So the copper itself is very thin. It's only the thickness of 2 pennies pressed together. And it's referred to as her skin. And incidentally, the copper is all from Norway, Norwegian copper. So she is composed of 350 separate pieces, all seamlessly riveted together. And the technique that they used to create all those pleats and folds in her wonderful robe is the same technique they used to make jewelry. It's called repoussé. And they warm the metal, and over a form with a wooden mallet, they hammer out the details. And there are examples of that in the museum. So embedded in her design are these symbols of revolution and freedom and liberty that La Boule was so passionate about. Some are very obvious, like the torch itself, a guiding light. Others a little bit more obscure, like in her left arm. Did you notice she was holding something looked like a book? It is a tablet, not an iPad, a tablet. Tablets have always been symbols of justice. Even Moses is depicted holding a tablet. On hers, the date, July 4th, 1776, etched on there into the surface in Roman numerals. The year we signed our Declaration of Independence and began our American Revolution, essentially. So, my favorite symbol, though, is her right back foot. Did you notice it? It was kind of poised, as if she's about to take a step forward, a step into liberty, into freedom. What you can't see, and in the museum there are replicas, around her robe are chains, metal chains. She's just broken free from the chains that hold us back, and she can now step forward into freedom and liberty. She is inspired by the Roman goddess of liberty, Libertas, but he takes her liberties with her design, and one of them is he changes her headdress. Here she wears a crown. Maybe you noticed it. It has 7 spikes coming out of it. Those spikes represent the 7 seas and the 7 continents and the rays of the sun that shine on all of us and guide us forward. Her face, inspired by his mother's face. He was very close to his mother. He was an only child. His father died when he was quite young. And he had that self-confidence that only children often get because they're so doted on. And he really believed he could create a statue of this magnitude without any funding. And he did it, is the amazing thing. The form of it inspired by his girlfriend. He marries her at the end of this project, which takes a fair amount of time. So, everything about her is big. Maybe you noticed. She wears an 879 size shoe. She has a 35-foot waist. She's 305 feet tall. She weighs 225 tons, which is 450,000 pounds. And she is struck by lightning 600 times a year. So that brings us to the importance of the engineering. It's one thing to come up with the design and she's stunning. It's another thing to keep her up and from falling over with all that weight and height. So everything takes so long that the very first engineer that's hired, the Leduc, he doesn't make it, he dies. His concept is very different from the second engineer. He was going to put sand and concrete in there and hold her up that way, but I don't think it would work. And so they eventually hire Gustave Eiffel. You heard of that guy? The creator of the Eiffel Tower. Well, Eiffel is an engineer of bridges. And he uses those concepts to come up with the design for the inside. As you probably know, suspension bridges have a certain amount of sway. And she can sway in the breeze too. So what he does is he basically creates an iron form on the inside and suspends the skin, the copper shell, over it. And it can move to some extent. And what's amazing is the design, because you can see where it leads afterwards. Eiffel hasn't as yet done the Eiffel Tower. He's very impressed by how immediate she becomes the symbol for all things American, and he wants very much to do that for France. And the inside of this statue is almost the blueprint for the Eiffel Tower. It's a shape kind of like the Eiffel Tower. It's not as tall, it's not as tapered, it's not as decorative, but you can see he's already worked out the concepts and he takes it a step, many steps forward. So there's a model of her in the museum where they cut away her back, and you can see the construction, and I think you'll find it really fascinating how much her interior resembles the Eiffel Tower. So really just an amazing work of art, and they're over in France working laboriously to get her completed. And there's a lot of fundraising stories, so how the money keeps, and I'm not going to bore you with all of those stories. I will mention two of them coming up, but they're essential to the story. But finally, they're ready. So they assemble her in front of the studio because she's too tall. She won't fit in the studio itself. And they put her together and they make sure she's perfect. And then they take her apart and they pack her up into 214 crates and ship her over here. She almost sings on the way, but she gets here. And then we go, oh my God, we got to pay for this pedestal. That's our responsibility. Everything's taken so long, the United States hasn't really paid too much attention to this idea that we got to come up with the money for the pedestal. So we start off with a design competition. Meanwhile, the crates sit here for a year. They sit here for 4 years. So we have a design competition, and Richard Morris Hunt, a wonderful American architect who studied classical architecture in France from the Gilded Age period, he wins the competition. That's his design. Maybe you've been to the Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York. Maybe you've seen the outside of it. He designed the exterior facade in that museum, which you should really go to. It's an extraordinary museum. So he's a great architect. He wins. And he's busy working on the pedestal, and he's short $100,000 to completion, which today doesn't sound like all that much for that, but back then in the 1880s, it was a significant amount of money. So a newspaper publisher is very much in favor of this project, named Joseph Pulitzer. Maybe you heard of the Pulitzer Prize. He says to his readers of his newspaper, the New York World, the tabloid of the day, if you donate any amount of money, even 1 penny, I will print your name on the front page of my newspaper. Everybody wants to see their name in print at least once on the front page of the paper. So those small donations, those nickels, those dimes, they come rolling in. And truly, it is the power of the people that get that statue up and completed. So October 28th, 1886, she is dedicated and revealed, and it's a big to-do here in New York. Dignitaries come from all around, and we have a huge parade that starts at Madison Square Park and runs down to Battery Park, where we just were. And that parade begins a tradition of ticker tape parades. The dedication of the statue was the first, and we still have them to this day. So that's her story reduced to its simplest terms. What I've left out of this story is a poem. And the poem was written as part of a fundraising event, and it is now etched into the pedestal. And it's written by an American poet named Emma Lazarus. The name of the poem is called The New Colossus. And by the 1880s, we were getting a flood of immigrants arriving in our harbor in steamships. They see her, the Statue of Liberty, and she transforms into a symbol, another symbol, of economic hope and opportunity, not just freedom and revolution and liberty. And this poem is all about that. And Emma Lazarus writes in the voice of the statue. And the first line is probably the best known line, and it goes like this. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And she's inviting everyone, come, I'm here for you, I'm a beacon of light. And it's a beautiful poem, by the way. So, that's her story. What I have left out of the story is the story of the torch. And I'm going to tell you that, how there came to be 2 torches. So when they were getting near completion, putting the statue together, they realized here at Liberty Island that they wanted to have that torch be used as a lighthouse. It wasn't Bartholdi's design, it wasn't his idea, and he really wasn't behind the project, but he just accepted it. So they used another firm to come up with the torch, which is glass and metal strips, and that's in the museum. It wasn't the best idea because there was no electricity on this island then. And it did function as a lighthouse, but it was really too dim to be a sufficient guiding light for ships coming into the harbor. After 16 years, they ditched that idea and just left it not as a torch. And now we're going to fast forward a little bit to 1916. It's World War I. I don't know if you paid attention to this coastline all around us, which is quite close. This is New Jersey, coastline of Jersey. And it's, you know, you could swim there, really. It's very, very close. And during World War I, there was an ammunition depot, almost diagonally there. It was called Black Tom. We were shipping arms over to Germany, over to Europe to help the Europeans defend themselves. And German sympathizers were attacked, and it caused a massive explosion, and many people died. And given how close it is to the statue, it caused damage to the statue. The arm of the statue went kaput, and the torch was dangling. So yes, they fixed it, they repaired it. But, you know, with time, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. You know, leakage and damage, and eventually they realized no matter what they did, it wasn't going to work. And they had to replace it. So, the design that you see there today is the original design of Bartholdi. They used his design, which is terrific. And it's all copper, aged to match the rest of the statue. And you may have noticed a golden flame that is made of 24 karat gold foil. So that's the story of Liberty enlightening the world. That's her official name. Anybody have any questions